Hello everybody. Today we're going to continue with our journey through B32 transport. So remember we ended talking about occlusion of coronary arteries, and this is a type of cardiovascular disease that is of course super duper duper dangerous. And for most people, this is the most common cause of death in the world, and there are many things that lead to people's risk of developing these issues, and there's a great amount of research being done, and there are some environmental risk factors that you should have experience looking at. So there's one very, very famous study called the Seven Country Study. I think it's called Seven Country Study or something like that. But here we see some of the 7 countries. So basically a classic study from like the 60s, 50s. I think it's kind of ongoing for a long time. But here it measures, it shows the, this is the one on the left. So it shows the incidence of death from coronary heart disease per 10,000 males in many different countries, versus the saturated fat intake as a fraction of the daily dietary energy, or maybe not daily, but dietary energy. And here's an extension of this for a few more countries, but I think it's maybe even divided for different populations, because Finland is like Eastern Finland, Western Finland, Northern Finland. I think that's all together in one group here, but something else here. Yeah. Anyways, so there's obviously a very nice correlation being shown here, and of course this is consistent with a hypothesis that average saturated fat intake or increased saturated fat intake could cause cardiovascular disease. However, remember that I think you're even, sorry for not saying that. The R value here shows the strength of the correlation. Normally it's with small r. Both 1 and -1 are the strongest possible correlations, but it's either positive, as in this case, so increasing fat intake, or saturated fat intake, and cardiovascular or coronary heart disease. But of course it could be negative as well. That would also be a correlation, but a -1. Anyways, remember that a correlation is expected if there's some kind of causal relationship between these two variables, but it's not by itself sufficient to conclude that there is causation. So we need more information to be able to do that, and we need to be able to exclude that the correlation we see is not caused by some kind of random thing or by other variables that we have not measured here, basically. So we can exclude other explanations for this, right? And there needs to be some kind of mechanism for how saturated fat intake in diet would lead to cardiovascular disease. And there are other types of epidemiological data that supports this, and one of the main ones is here looking at the serum cholesterol level. So basically this is a concentration of cholesterol in blood serum. So blood serum is the part of your blood that is not the cells, so it's basically a liquid part of your blood, and it basically shows two things at the same time. It's a double plot, as we call it sometimes, or YY plot, has 2 y-axes. So one shows the amount of deaths from coronary heart disease, and the other one shows the occurrence of something. So here the line shows the deaths from coronary heart disease in the UK, and the bars shows the occurrence of different amounts of serum cholesterol levels. So basically, you see that with increasing serum cholesterol level, there's basically a bigger part of, a bigger proportion of these groups that die due to coronary heart disease. But there's less of them there's a smaller occurrence of these higher levels in the population, which means that you couldn't explain this by more people, that more people are in this group by default, basically. And that's why you have a bigger portion. Instead, it shows that there's basically an increasing risk with increasing cholesterol level. So the next part would be showing that saturated fat can lead to higher cholesterol levels, and there's quite a bit of evidence for that too, but there's still a lot of studies going on, but for decades now, most ministries like for diets here in Sweden is called Livsmedelsverket is called, and from many other countries as well, suggest that we should limit the amount of saturated fat we take in, because your cholesterol levels in your blood is made actually from your own liver, from saturated fats mainly. So that's how it goes. Anyways, so there's still uncertainty going on, but that's kind of the main story at the moment. But every day you read about something, you will find new information. So I'm sure we haven't heard the last thing about what causes cardiovascular disease yet. But saturated fats, bad with the current data. Eating fiber, good. So keep eating fiber, restrict your saturated fat, you're doing the best you can. Okay, moving on. Now we're going to shift from human blood system to the plants. And in plants, we first will learn about the transpiration stream. So this means that there's a stream of water from the roots up to your leaves that is caused by the transpiration happening in the leaves. And that's due to the transpiration, but also the physical properties of water and the adaptations in vascular plants. So let's look at the physical properties of water and the adaptations for this and the whole shebang. So basically, the loss of water here at the leaves through transpiration leads to negative pressure gradients. Basically, you lose water, so kind of water's being pulled out, and that's due to the cohesive properties of water. So basically, water is moving away over here and then at the leaves, but from the veins or the vascular bundles inside the leaf, water is then being drawn out from the vessels that contain water, and the part of the vessels that contain water or transports water is called the xylem, and that's where it will come back many times. And as it exits the xylem, it goes through the cell walls of the leaf cells, and it does so via capillary action as well. Now, the negative water pressures at the leaves basically pulls water through the stem as well, causing this upward movement of water against gravity. And how can the plants achieve this? Well, first you have remember from A11, that was really long ago, wasn't it? But that water being polar has these cohesive properties. So water molecules attract to each other, right? So it's basically like there's electrical forces or electromagnetic forces pulling them towards each other. So basically the water molecules are pulling on each other. So as there's some movement up here, basically they pull each other along. This is continuous water column. And the adhesive properties of the water molecules allow them to stick to the walls in the xylem as well and not fall backwards, and help them work against the gravity. And finally, at the roots, water is pushed into the xylem. So basically the xylem is basically in here, right? Well, actually also in the roots in here leading into the main xylem. But the roots are pulling water from the environment via osmosis. So they're actively pumping in ions into the xylem. So water from the cells are pulled into the xylem, and from the outside diffuses into the root cells. We're going to learn way more about that in higher level. So good for you. Let's look at the xylem then. So the xylem is this the part of the vascular bundles in plants that transports water. And here are some micrographs showing the xylem vessels in here from basically a transverse cut. So basically you cut the tube and look at the ends of the tube. And this one is looking alongside the tube. You see all these nice little stripes going up and down. We'll see what those are briefly. And the xylem has several adaptations to make it function well as a water transporting system. So the cells that make up the xylem, they're dead. So it lacks cell content. So here is where the cell, this is part of the cell, right? And so the only thing you have left is basically the cell wall up here. And all the parts of the cell that was inside are gone. So here, that would be the cytoplasm of the cell, that's gone. So there's now something else. And between different kind of parts of the xylem, there are absent cell walls in those parts of making a full tube, basically. So the removing of the content and not having walls in basically the tube direction means that you have a hollow tube. These walls are either absent or incomplete. It means that you get these hollow tubes at least, where there's unimpeded flow of water through the tube. Now the walls of the xylem tubes are thickened with cellulose and the protein lignin, and that's what makes these lines in here that you can also see here, right? So that makes it very strong. So, and that's good because the water here that is transported is under tension, so they can basically withstand this. The movement of water inside the xylem is passive. These cells are dead, so there's no active movement of the water, and it only goes in one direction, from the roots up to the leaves. One direction. Isn't that some kind of band? Well, finally, inside these walls, there are every now and then there are pores called pits where water can exit the xylem to the tissues that need it. Basically here you can see those pits as well. So here it shows the roots and the xylem inside. So basically the roots, here the water is taken up by osmosis. Your book makes a lot about this, and I think you're going to get more of this in higher level, and I don't see any other books bringing it in, but basically it kind of helps show a little bit of this at least. So osmosis, you take the water in at the roots, and it is basically then traveling into the xylem because you basically push these ions are pushed into the xylem here. This big thing here tube shows the xylem. And you see all these little pits here where water can enter the xylem from below, and here it's being pulled out at the leaves going out. Okay, leaving the xylems, now we're gonna also learn how to identify the root tissues of plants, specifically on Dicotyledonous plant, or dicots. And the idea here is that you should be able to draw diagrams or micrographs to show the specific cool tissues in here. I forgot to do animations of this, sorry. Anyways, the outer part of the root is the epidermis, so it's a layer of cells that make up the outer part of the cell, of the root. In the roots, this is where you absorb water and nutrients, so there needs to have a lot of extra surface area, right? So there are these special root hairs that extend from it every now and then, and they make the surface area more because you can absorb over the root hairs as well. And these continuously build and die off, so that's really neat. Inside the epidermis, you have the cortex. These cortex cells, that's a different type of tissue where there's only very loosely packed cells. That helps allow the water to move into the vascular bundle that's in the center, where it's going to lead to the rest of the plant. This is also a place where where you can store starch in the plant. So basically starch that's produced and the leaves get sent down to the roots and put here. Then we have the vascular bundle here. That contains then the xylem, usually in red, and the phloem in blue. The xylem transports water from the root to the top of the plant, whereas the phloem transports organic nutrients. So these transport in both directions in the phloem, but it's here it should be having organic contents or nutrients coming from the leaves. Around the vascular bundle there's this little border of cells called the endodermis. It doesn't look like you need to be able to identify this, but to draw this specific part, it's not clearly in the syllabus, so maybe you can skip that. But that's called the endodermis here. For a higher level, it will become important, so I'm just going to mention it for them. But for standard level, I think you just need to be able to identify the epidermis, cortex, and the vascular bundle with the xylem and phloem. So how would that look in reality? This is how that will look. You see this xylem, you see the epidermis out here. The cortex is this part here, and the vascular bundle is in the center, with the xylem here, with the big cells up here, and then out here with the smaller hollow cells, those are smaller cells, those are the phloem cells here. So basically xylem and phloem, this is the whole vascular bundle. You need to be able to, for the stem at least, to show the plant diagram, but this is a plant diagram to root tissue, which you maybe will need to be able to do, because it says she's able to draw diagrams, so I assume they actually mean plant diagrams, but whatever. Finally then, the last part of standard level B32 is going to be the stem of the dicotyledonous plant. So it has basically the same types of tissues that we saw for the root, but slightly different. Still, there's an epidermis, but the epidermis now has slightly different role. Now it's covered with wax to protect against water loss and damage. It doesn't absorb water as it does in the root, of course. You still have a cortex in here shown in green, but it has two parts. You have the main cortex, and in the center you have the pith, or the central part. These are responsible for two things: the storage of nutrients and lateral growth. So whenever you start seeing basically the plant will have to grow outwards, right, and become broader stems, and that happens by the cortex cells. Now the vascular bundles now are slightly different in the stem. Basically, we have many of them that are placed in a concentric ring around the central part of the cortex. So basically, they are here. And the blue part still is the phloem, and the xylem is the red still. So the xylem is central, and the phloem is facing outwards. This is how that would look in an actual plant. So you see the nice pith here in the middle of the part of the cortex. You see the rest of the cortex out here, and the epidermis at the very end. And you see all these vascular bundles here with the xylem in the middle, and then the phloem cells on the external part. Xylem always has this much bigger hollow cell sensor. All these white bits here are the hollow xylem cells. And you see that in the red here in the plant diagram. So the plant diagram should look like this. And that's what we're gonna do together when we meet on Wednesday next week. So this is it for the B32 standard level. Enjoy!